The rain had begun before sunset, a slow, cold drizzle that turned the dust of Red Creek Crossing into a slushy mess. Inside the ramshackle trading post, the air was thick with pipe smoke and the smell of whiskey. Men laughed too loudly, the clinking of glasses mingling with the muffled groans of a storm outside. At the far corner, seated near the fire, sat a man who didn't join the laughter, a tall rancher named Clay Mercer. His hat brim shadowed half his face, his boots muddy from the trail, and his long duster dripping onto the floorboards. He had come here for one reason, to settle a debt, though not in the way anyone expected. When the trader, a wiry man named Dobbs, swaggered over with a sly grin, Clay didn't look up. "You said you had someone needing a home," Clay said evenly, voice low and gravelly. "Someone you were planning to send off with the cattle buyers." Dobbs snorted. "Home, ain't that a funny word for it? She's property, Mercer. Paid for, delivered, simple as that." Clay's jaw tightened. "I'll pay what you're askin'. But she's comin' with me, and you don't lay another finger on her." Dobbs squinted, trying to catch the meaning in Clay's tone. "You're serious?" Clay laid a thick stack of bills on the counter. "That enough to buy her freedom?" The trader laughed, slapping the money. "Freedom, I don't sell dreams, Mercer, I sell flesh. You want her, she's yours." He turned and barked toward the back room. The door opened, and a girl stepped out slowly, barefoot and trembling. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, her hair dark as a raven's wing, falling loose over her shoulders. Her face was smudged with dirt, but her eyes, wide, wary, full of something like disbelief, fixed on Clay with quiet intensity. Dobbs pushed her forward roughly. "Go on, he paid for you." Clay stood, his tall frame towering over her. He saw the bruise on her arm, the mark of a handprint still red against her skin. His throat went tight. She whispered something he couldn't quite hear, her voice fragile under the rain's patter on the roof. "What's your name?" Clay asked. She hesitated, then spoke softly, "Lena." Dobbs smirked. "Lena ain't much for talkin'. But she'll do as told." Clay turned, his gaze cold enough to cut glass. "Then I reckon I'll tell you to mind your mouth." The room went quiet. The other men shifted uneasily. Clay's reputation was known, a rancher who'd fought off raiders, who lived half his life in silence and the other half rebuilding what war had torn from him. He had no taste for cruelty, and even less for men like Dobbs. He walked over to the girl and took off his coat. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. She flinched at first, expecting another rough touch, but when his hand didn't grab or shove, she froze in confusion. "Come on," he said softly. "We're leavin'." Outside, the storm broke loose, the wind sweeping across the empty plains like a living thing. Clay led her to his horse, a dark bay that stamped nervously in the mud. He helped her up into the saddle first, then swung up behind her, careful not to startle her. For miles, they rode in silence. Only the sound of the rain and the horse's steady gait filled the night. Clay could feel her shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper, some memory of pain that clung to her like the storm itself. Halfway across the plain, she spoke for the first time, voice trembling. You paid for me." "Why?" Clay took a slow breath, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "'Cause no one else would. You could have left me there." "I could have," he said. "But I didn't." She turned slightly, her wet hair brushing his chin. "What do you want from me, then?" His hands on the reins didn't move. "Nothing you don't want to give." Her breath hitched. "They said you'd use me." "They were wrong," he said quietly. "You're free now, Lena." She blinked hard, tears mixing with the rain. "Free," she whispered, the word foreign on her tongue. Clay nodded toward the distance, where a faint glow of lamplight marked his ranch. There's my place. You can stay as long as you need. There's a spare room, fire's warm, ain't much, but it's safe." The ride ended at dawn, when the first pink light broke through the clouds. Clay helped her down from the horse, guiding her gently to the porch. She stumbled, weak and soaked, and he caught her by the arm. For a second, her eyes locked on his, those same eyes that had seen too much of the world's cruelty, and she whispered something broken. "You've paid for me, just do it." The words hung in the cold morning air, trembling, wounded. She wasn't pleading, she was bracing herself, expecting him to take what others had taken before. Morning broke over the plains in a pale wash of golden gray. The storm had left everything damp and quiet, the earth steaming, the sagebrush glistening, and the air smelling of rain and pine. Clay Mercer stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. The horses were fed, the fences still standing. For once, life seemed to breathe a slower rhythm. But when he looked toward the house, his jaw softened. Through the kitchen window, he saw her, Lena, standing by the table, still wearing one of his old shirts that hung loose on her shoulders. Her hair was clean now, still damp, falling freely down her back. The bruises on her arm had faded to pale yellow, but the shadow behind her eyes remained. She moved carefully, as if the house might punish her for being inside it. Clay took off his hat before stepping in. The floor creaked beneath his boots, and she turned quickly, startled. "Sorry," he said softly. "Didn't mean to scare you." She shook her head, eyes darting to the floor. "No, you didn't." There was a pot of coffee on the stove, thin steam rising from it. Clay noticed she'd also tried to make biscuits, though half were burnt and the rest half cooked. She saw his eyes flicker toward the tray and flushed with embarrassment. "I thought, maybe I could help," she murmured, twisting the hem of the shirt nervously. "You gave me food, a bed. I should do something." He smiled faintly. "You already did, Lena. You slept. That's more than enough for your first night here. I don't know how to just sit," she whispered. "I can see that." He poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. "Then sit with me a while. That's all I'm askin'." For a long time, they sat in silence, the only sounds the ticking of the clock and the slow hum of wind outside. Clay leaned back in his chair, sipping his drink, giving her space. He'd learned long ago that silence could heal more than words. But Lena, who had lived under orders and fear, didn't know what to do with silence that wasn't punishment. Finally, she asked, "Why are you alone out here?" He took a deep breath. "Wasn't always. Used to be a family here. My wife, Sarah, she died 6 winters back. Lost her to fever." Lena's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "Ain't your sorrow to carry. But I reckon, since then, I forgot what it was like to hear another voice in this house." Her gaze drifted to the window, the horizon stretching endless beyond the glass. "I forgot what it's like to be inside one," she said quietly. He looked at her, really looked. The way she hunched her shoulders as if expecting rebuke, the way her hands trembled when she reached for her cup. The marks left on her weren't just bruises, they were habits of survival. And he knew better than to break those with kindness too. "Fast, Lena," he said after a moment, "you can stay here as long as you need. But you don't owe me a thing. Not work, not words, not anything." She frowned, confused. "Then why do you keep saying that?" "'Cause you keep waitin' for the catch," he said gently. "For me to take what those men did." She froze. Her breath hitched. He continued, his tone low and steady. "I'm not them. I never will be." Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden. She turned away quickly, ashamed. "You don't understand," she said. "They said I was cursed. That no man would ever want me unless he forced it. That I was good for nothing but—" "Enough," Clay said, voice firm but not harsh. "You ain't cursed. You were hurt, and that's not the same thing." She looked at him, her lip trembling. "Then what am I?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes soft with truth. "You're someone startin' over, and I reckon that's the bravest thing anyone can be." The room went still. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Instead, she just nodded, a small, fragile nod that broke something inside both of them. The days that followed were quiet, filled with simple work. Clay showed her how to feed the chickens, patch a fence, boil coffee without burning it. At first, she moved like a ghost, afraid of laughter, afraid of mistakes. But slowly, something began to shift. He'd find her humming softly while sweeping the porch. He'd catch her watching the sunset from the fence post, the orange light painting her hair copper. When she smiled, a small, fleeting thing, it startled him more than thunder. One evening, he came back from the pasture to find her at his old upright piano, the one Sarah used to play. Lena's fingers hovered over the keys uncertainly. "I shouldn't," she said when she saw him. He smiled faintly. "You can. It's been quiet too long." She pressed a single key, and the note wavered in the still air. Then another, and another. The melody was simple, hesitant, childlike, but there was a purity in it that made Clay's chest ache. When she stopped, she turned to him shyly. "It's the only song I remember." "It's beautiful," he said. "Keep playing it." She did, every night after that, a little longer each time. It became their ritual, her playing by lamplight, him listening from his chair with his head resting on his knee. Neither spoke much. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer the kind born from fear, but from peace.